My thought process behind choosing the album, Sam said last week, choose an album that takes you to somewhere else. And I was like, I have an idea of something that we definitely haven't listened to. Um, I guess we've listened to some stuff similar to this, but not really. Um, and it certainly fulfills that qualification for me. Whether in
Yeah,
a
definitely.
whether in a good or bad way, um, that is, I suppose, up to the individual.
Yeah. It has a very, very distinct sense of place. Like the phrase that kept running through my head listening to it was like suburban pastoralism,
Mm.
right? It's this weird, yeah. It almost feels like, utopian in the traditional sense, meaning like a no place, right? This kind of weird dream environment.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good
Not
word.
like, again, not utopian in the way it's frequently used to imply, perfection, but just again, it's like this place that with themes that exist in harmony that are kind of mutually exclusive in reality, right? Again, that like bucolic sensibility with this kind of suburban angst and worldview.
Absolutely. Um. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely does a good job at taking you somewhere. Um, to me, it is like you said, it's sort of dreamlike. It's sort of like it's not necessarily positive. It's sort of like when you're kind of sick and you're kind of in a like a half awake state for a lot of the day. You know what I'm saying? It's not like fever dream, like it's not
Yeah,
as quite as aggressive as that, but it's sort of that like half waking, just sort of like
yeah,
dazed sort of feeling. Um,
yeah. It's like day 6 on cough medicine.
yeah. Um, so I had definitely heard this album before. I even have the vinyl. Um, because I thought that's one of the ones. This is kind of an album that tonally I think sounds good on vinyl. Um,
Makes sense.
but have you? I mean, I know you've heard of Arcade Fire, but have you heard anything from this album before?
I don't believe so. I think I've heard some of their other more recent stuff. Um, but yeah, this is definitely the first time I've ever like just sat down and listened to one of their albums back to front.
Yeah, you've probably heard "Wake Up." If you've heard any song from this album, I think "Wake Up" was the song that was
I
like
think I have.
it was like in a movie or something. I don't remember. I could probably like
Yeah, I
I
think
have the
if I'm
Wikipedia page open. I could,
remembering correctly, if I'm remembering correctly, I was exposed to a lot of them on a road trip when I turned 18.
that makes sense. That's about the time in your life when one would listen to Arcade Fire a lot.
Yeah, yeah. The guy I was on the trip with was playing a lot of them and like Vampire Weekend, I
Yeah,
think.
that makes sense. Vampire Weekend is definitely there's
Yeah, I
definitely
realize I some overlap in those audiences.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it does look like it was in quite a few things. I'm not gonna name all the like oh it was played during the Super Bowl. Like who gives a fuck? Um, it was on The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. This song is in that.
That
Um,
tracks.
Where the Wild
Yeah,
Things Are.
with the Oniric quality.
Um, the 2009 Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
We're
in a few
seeing
movies.
kind of recurringly. Yeah, and in movies with pretty surreal,
Yeah.
um, overtly dreamlike qualities.
Yeah, both
Well
of those
chosen.
movies very specifically are sort of otherworldly. Yeah.
Yeah, dealing with fantasy.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so I think a lot of people have heard that song, just didn't know where it's from or something. Um, I will say, as further background for this song, or not this song, this album, this is sort of a indie darling, like early 2000s indie music. You think of like Arcade Fire, like the Shins or something like that, like that kind of music, the like sad, like
And
kind of
it
folky.
and it definitely has that like sound,
Mm-hmm. But I
just in terms of these kind of like fragile, very rhythmically consistent melody lines and backing elements.
Yeah. Like, for instance, I had the Pitchfork review.
Very processed vocal.
Pitchfork rated this 9.7. So this is like this is like one of those albums, like, you know what I mean? Um
Hmm.
yeah, don't let that affect your judgment whatsoever of the piece of music.
I won't.
Yeah, because you also have to remember this came out in 2004. The music landscape was very different in 2004, and this kind of music was new in 2004. It is very much so played out now. Like, people still do like that, like indie, whatever, like the soft.
Yeah, the mid 2000s alt sound,
Yeah,
alt indie sound.
yeah. People still do it now, and there are people who do it well now, but it's a lot more cliche in 2021. Um, uh,
Yeah, and something that came to mind thinking, just as we were listening to them, is that I can sort of hear the through line, because we listened to a Bentley album a couple of weeks ago, and I can sort of feel these guys as being these kind of more sedate predecessors, right? I have a sense that these guys would definitely, some of the members of Bentley almost certainly listened to this album, right? But in their case, the sound is updated, right? And it feels like Bentley's stuff is kind of an evolution of that, like art rock,
right.
art indie rock sound.
Yeah.
Updated with more contemporary approaches. I mean, right down to some of the instrumentation, right? Like Bentley also has a violinist who lays down a lot of elements.
Right.
I don't know where they got a timpani on this track. That was kind of a neat. I forget which song the timpani shows up on this album, but
yeah, I don't.
There's a very brief use of the timpani, and I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I like this album, is that there's a lot of like orchestral bits, and it's not necessarily the focus of the music, but in the way that sort of a more like proggy band or something like that would incorporate a lot of other instruments and just do it as background instruments, not as a like, hey, look at this, I'm playing the fucking violin, isn't that so cool? It's just like, yeah, there's some violin in the background of some tracks just because it sounds nice. It sounds nice to have some violin.
Yeah. And I think that definitely contributes to the kind of unrooted in time quality of the whole album, right? This alloying of like a bunch of different strains and types of instrumentation and approaches to soundscaping. Again, we've got like the vocals being processed in this really like in many cases heavily distorted, like heavily processed, but not processed to sound clean and crisp, right? The way we're used to contemporary pop sounding. Just lots of like delays and or panning, double tracking, which that's not revolutionary, but there's usually something going on to alter them.
Yeah.
Whereas the instruments are generally a little, or at least the strings and stuff are pretty much always cleaner. But we'll be playing elements, we'll be playing lines that also muddy things up. There's a really neat kind of not quite aleatoric. I think it was just like a chromatic atonal string build that happens on one of the tracks. That I thought was a really neat touch.
Yeah. And that reminds me of something, that this album definitely, on the surface, seems like pop. Seems like it's just supposed to be sort of pretty and happy, but sort of deeper under the surface, it's sort of a little weirder and a little more like it's playing a little bit deeper with like the psyche and sort of like
it's uneasy.
Yeah.
Or
like this is one of those albums that kind of makes you feel nostalgic a little bit, especially towards the beginning. There's sort of a childlike aspect to some of the, like, even the lyrical themes and stuff. It's sort of about like growing up and
mm-hmm.
and like doing these things, whatever, kid shit. And it kind of makes you feel nostalgic for a childhood that you've never had. I don't remember the name of that word, the having nostalgia for something you've never experienced.
I think Anamoya.
If anyone would know, it'd be you. I mean, I could Google it.
Yeah, nostalgia for a time that never was. I think it's Anamoya.
Yeah.
And I think,
but yeah, like I definitely. Okay, I will make a comparison right now. Okay, because I consider this album and In the Aeroplane Over the Sea very similar. There's obviously one that I like a lot more, and I will not necessarily reveal that right now, although it should be pretty obvious to most people, I think. But, like, this one seems weirdly less pleasant, even though it's not as dark. Like, it kind of feels like... like, I don't know, like, I keep using, like, metaphors or similes. Yeah?
I could see that being as much because of the, like, struggle to remain optimistic that almost feels like it's, like, renders it more painful in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. I should have taken more notes.
Oh, yeah.
Amoya, what? Anamoya?
Yep. Is nostalgia for a time you've never known.
Nice. Yeah, I'd like to hear more of your thoughts.
Yeah.
On this album, either individual tracks or like what was your take? Like when you first started listening to it, what did you think?
I think like initially, I think just the way human brains work in general, right? Like the first thing you start doing is going like, okay, what kind of influences, what kind of similarities to other stuff that I've heard am I detecting here? What themes are they invoking? And like, it's like, on the one hand, in some of the like choked, syncopated vocal delivery, I hear like some Talking Heads influence. But obviously there's a much more like, again, like deeply rooted in suburbia and suburban it seems dismissive to say angst, but I don't mean it in a dismissive way, right? Like just suburban anxiety, suburban like the like. And I think in general, you know, I always have a hard time paying really close attention to lyrics on the first pass through, but in general, like what they touch on have so much to like. There are so many themes of like loss and change and the passage of time, right? And I think that suburban anxiety is very much about like this like widescreen view and just sense of the kind of like pointlessness of it all. Or the self-contained, the sense that one's life is this sort of self-contained drama, right? Bound to a place, and reaching very little beyond that. And yet, you know, the album itself is clearly an escape from that pattern, and that it's been disseminated to people. It's offered this mutual point of connection. Yeah, I think the joke that I made internally was like, if you hybridized Modest Mouse and Talking Heads, you'd get something kind of close to this, but brought in a lot more overt like American folk instrumentation, because David Byrne, I mean, notoriously uses instruments from all over the world, but he actually hasn't done a ton of stuff with like more traditional. He's written for orchestra and stuff, but not like, he hasn't written with an explicitly like American folk derived vocabulary very much. But yeah, I think in general my thoughts are align pretty much with yours. I think that Anemoia is this very and for us, right, that's what it's going to place for the artists, right? But you know, these are people who are, I guess, you know, they're writing about like a childhood that would have been about a decade before ours, probably a decade, maybe a little more.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
was
that
9.
specter of the 90s childhood. Yep. I think that like specter of the 90s childhood experience sort of like was still present, at least in my growing up, right?
Right.
And I imagine it was for yours as well, because you would have like family members who were like 90s kids and had this idea of what being a kid was. And we grew up in this weird transitional space between the like just starting to integrate tech,
right,
90s like millennials, right? And like, so for us, I think it does feel like this thing that didn't really exist. And the kind of like nostalgic glaze that goes over it means, I think, in a very real way, they're relaying of their past. You know, everyone is an unreliable narrator, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, again, that sense of like internal conflict, again, of that like this kind of suburban discussion of neighborhoods, which aren't really a thing in rural environments, right? Or at least they're so diffuse they wouldn't be what we would call a neighborhood in a traditional sense, right? You know, the closest house might be like a mile away. So this discussion of neighborhoods, while still having that like sense of the immediacy of a more like natural, organic environment against which, as the backdrop to these human dramas, I think further cements that sense of time and, you know, the kind of like geological scales that nature witnesses things on. But
yeah, absolutely. I definitely get a vibe of like a Midwest town that's like on the border of like a forest or something. That's like, it's like not a huge town, but it's, you know, it's not, you know, there's more than one Walmart. There's maybe 2 or something like that. Funny enough,
yeah, exactly.
Arcade Fire is Canadian, so It wasn't about a Midwest town. But Canada is just, a big Midwest, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, unless they're from like Toronto or Vancouver.
No.
I'm sure I Canadians, correct me. I'm sure you have other urban centers.
Hello?
Densely populated urban centers.
Montreal is what you're looking for. And that is where they recorded this.
Yep.
So the French.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I think those themes actually do make more sense, at least based on the purely mimetic understanding of what Canadian suburb life would be like.
Mm.
Like in Phoenix suburb experience would be like.
Yeah. It's
I
like
think
this.
One's relationship to nature is very different.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh my god.
You cut out there. You said it was like this, but what?
Oh, but the opposite. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, nature's like something that really actively wants to kill you all the time. Which I guess, to be fair, in winter, that's.
Yeah, I was gonna
true
say
in the
it's
north as
probably
well.
easier to die in the winter in Canada. At least in the desert, you have to go out for a couple days. You could die overnight in Canada.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, you can get like fatal heat stroke in like 30 minutes here, but we won't get
That's
into
true.
that.
That's
Start
true.
Measuring exposure death times.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah. In further, this is the less a discussion in the sound itself, but it like more in further like connections to Bentley. Like you can sort of tell. It's not always easy, but like I feel like there's a sound that bands tend to get when they operate more like a collective than like tend to get when they operate a product necessarily. There's just a way elements tend to play together in a way like little imperfections and like single notes, single like interesting accents get added, right? Because they're all throughout this, they're like nice. There's a fair amount of repetition and the drummer just locking in a groove and hanging out in that space.
Right.
But there will also be little accidentals in the composition sense, not meaning played by accident, but just notes that are deviations from the small
The
moments
key.
out of key.
Yeah.
Kind of scattered throughout, and seeing all of their names listed on the songwriting credits made sense. And again, I think that lends itself more to that like band as ecosystem, art as window into ecosystem, right? I think that's what gives this such a strong sense of place, is all of these separate individuals bringing their own voices to it and harmonizing in a kind of symbiotic way. Which isn't to say that organismic music can't be made by solo producers. It absolutely can. I think it's harder to do.
Yeah, I think you have to have a special sort of workflow to be able to do that as a solo producer.
Yeah.
Because you're definitely, when you're contributing or when you have to analyze the different parts and stuff individually and stuff. No, I would say that's one of the biggest strengths
and, identify each of their essences.
Right, absolutely. I would say that's one of the biggest strengths of just this album in general, is the sort of organismic quality that sort of the, and I think that does contribute to the like it not being so one note, it not just like staying on the same sort of vibe. And I mean, it's not that I'm not saying the album's not like cohesive or the same vibe, but like its complexity, I should say, like its emotional complexity that it lends. Um,
Yeah.
so shouts
Yeah,
out.
the sense of multiple perspectives on the same event being
Mm-hmm.
present.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one tiny note. I'd be kind of interested in knowing what the logic behind the song order was, mostly because they use exactly the same trick on two songs consecutively, and I just thought it was interesting to put them right next to each other.
Which
I
two
don't know if that was
songs?
intentional because there's like a trajectory. It was on Love and Wake Up both have both close out with this like dancey up tempo minute and a half or so.
That's true.
After what is otherwise a kind of like slow build song. So it's just interesting hearing that same, like as with any artist, like there are a couple, you can tell there are some tricks that they like using, right? Like 16th line string texture all over this album. Whoever
Yeah.
they had on strings clearly enjoys doing that. You know, I as a guitarist, I wanted to point at my own like identifiable things. Lots of tremolo picking, lots of just, you know. So everyone does that, but yeah, it was just interesting hearing it like a song structure kind of reused
Mm-hmm.
um, consecutively. So I'm curious about why that was. If there was more intentionality to the flow, and it just so happened that it was like, well, these tracks are serving this purpose
Right.
in like the arc of the album, and you know, despite the fact that there are two kind of similar tricks being deployed here, we're just going to put them next to each other because that's what's necessary, or if it was just sort of an oversight.
Yeah.
But
This definitely does feel like an album that is intentionally ordered. You know what I'm saying? So, that is a curious
yeah,
thing. Yeah, I wish. Can't email Arcade Fire, unfortunately, about that kind of thing. Like, I might be able to a smaller artist. Um, doubt I'd get a response. Maybe. Um, I mean, it's been what, 17 years? Not exactly, 16 and some change since they released this album. So maybe they would remember. And they're not as popular now as they used to be. But this style of music isn't like hip with the kids anymore, you know what I mean? Like, it's all people in their mid-20s or older that listen to this. And there are definitely some exceptions, like to anything, like, obviously. But, like, you know, you're not hearing Arcade Fire on TikTok or something like that.
I'm just waiting for, you know, the generation of children that grew up listening to our music, and will be like, man, they made real music in the mid 2000s. Music died with Arcade Fire.
You know, no, there is absolutely people who think that kind of shit. Oh my god. But you know what? This genre has evolved.
Just
Oh, go ahead.
well, go ahead.
Oh, this genre has evolved into what is popular now, at least, is the more like bedroom pop sound, the more like soft and
Yeah.
like dreamy and whatever sound. which is also it's more lo-fi. It's more, but like that music that is popular today that you would hear on TikTok or whatever would not exist without this. Um, that is the evolution from this. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. Besides making the point itself. Same as Frozen. On my end, at least.
That's the reason a lot of people are going for a lo-fi. That?
Huh? Oh, you were completely frozen. For a second.
Oh.
I don't know if it was
frozen.
me
Okay.
or you, but yeah.
I think what you're kind of identifying there is sort of the extent to which the spirit underlying this kind of music has survived and proven remarkably resilient, right? I think you're right in that I don't think people aren't making music with this kind of intent anymore. I just think you're right that it is coming out and being expressed as like bedroom pop now.
Yeah.
And the reason it's part of the reason the lo-fi sound is popular, right? I mean that, and the fact that we're still haunted by the 8-bit melodies of the games of our youth, but and of course obviously the tremendous contribution, like obviously like hip hop using vinyl samples,
Yeah.
and tapes and whatnot, like that contributed to the affinity for that sound as well. But like this track, this album has kind of a lo-fi quality to it, presumably because it's in equipment that just imparts that kind of a sound.
Absolutely.
Whereas now we're capturing it with plugins and shit. But
I mean,
and I think the one
there's not a huge
what was
difference. There's not a huge difference. Like conceptually, like obviously.
Oh no, yeah.
Say that again.
You froze for me there.
Yeah, you
froze for me there.
Yeah. Maybe it's both of our internets.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and in general, I do think, obviously in COVID times in particular, it has moved a little more towards the solo artist. But I think the transition towards bedroom pop does reflect the kind of, and I think exactly the thing that sort of gives you and I that sense of anomia, right? Is that like, as individuals, like we've become increasingly isolated with plenty of ways to connect via the internet, but in terms of the actual work that gets done creatively, a lot of that is, even when people collaborate, it's like, I'm going to work on something and I notes on it, right? It removes a lot of that spontaneity. So when you hear artists collaborate right now, it feels a lot more like swapping solos than it does the kind of ecosystem that you're hearing in Arcade Fire's music, right? It's more,
That's true.
Everyone kind of throws in their own little element and it speaks for itself. And again, that's still, that's a well-established mode from, going all the way back to jazz. But in general, the bedroom producer is not working with a ton of other people, except for distance collabs.
Right.
So, but again, that's more. I think that's more what dates the music a little bit, but also just demonstrates the way in which that creative spirit has had to account for that kind of increased isolation and alienation. And I think, alienation's nothing new.
Right.
Indie groups the outsiders finding a community,
Right.
whereas now the physical community component is far less. I think there are plenty of people who would probably disagree with me, given that I'm something of a hermit by nature. They're out there if you look for them.
Yeah. I mean,
friends affected the sound and affected the sense that you get from the music, right? Like the whole lo-fi sound feels like you're playing somebody else's memories a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so frozen right now. It is so frozen right now. Okay. While we wait for it to catch up, let's do some Arcade Fire funeral facts. Let's see. It was recorded over the course of a week. That's crazy. At the Hotel Tutango. That is a recording studio. Okay. Looks like someone's house. Which, that's chill. Hello? I'll wait for him to speak. Let's see. 9.7 out of 10. Wait, there was another interesting fact. Hail is a modern classic. Oh, it's number 500 on the Rolling Stones top 500 albums. I have to disagree with that. I think that there are a lot of albums, because I've looked at the top 500. I couldn't tell you all of them off the top of my head. I couldn't tell you any of them off the top of my head. I think number 1 is like some Beatles album or something. Also, fucking dog. You can hear the dog. There are a lot of albums on the top 500 that I think this is better than. But, you know, it was written by boomers. What can you expect? Boomers have bad taste. Yeah, I don't think any Zoomer writing a top 500 album, maybe some people, but like, do you think any fucking are gonna put the Beatles as the number 1 album? I mean, the Beatles are great. Don't get me wrong, Beatles are amazing, but number 1? Oof, it is him having internet issues. Okay, well, at least I know. Here I am alone. The first solo music club, baby. Okay. More facts. Oh, wait, okay. There was something about it being... I'll probably... Oh my god, dog. Too fond of drama. Oh, yeah, okay. It was the second most... Sam. Nothing. This is... He sent me a Facebook message. Restarting router. Word. I'm talking. I'm just... what am I doing right now? This is solo dolo. I will wait. Wait for you. I will wait. I'm reading the Wikipedia page right now. That is what I'm doing. Hey, we got one viewer. So number two. Oh yeah. Number two on the top 200 albums of the 2000s, just behind Radiohead's Kid A. Which, you know what? I can give you that one. And I think someone who listens to Radiohead, this is a little less angsty. So there's definitely a dividing line between them where someone might fall on the other side, but I think there's a big overlap as well. For people who Radiohead is is the least angsty or heavy thing that they listen to, would not listen to this. But someone who listens to this and loves it would probably also listen to Radiohead. Let's see if he said anything else. Nope. So we're just gonna keep rolling, baby, and talk more about my feelings about the album. Computer is taking approximately forever to restart. It's all good. I don't know. I think there are a lot of like there used to be a huge community of like indie kids that like worship this kind of music, and I think that has turned a lot of people off of this kind of genre, and I would include Sam in those people. But I think a lot of communities, I don't know, I guess that's just stan culture. That's just stan culture. It's like you take something good, you take something enjoyable, like K-pop or whatever, right? That's just the first thing I can think of with stans. Beyonce. Or whoever else people fucking talk about on Twitter. Lady Gaga. Who Demi Lovato stands. The more, I will say this, the more it gets into obscurity, the more vicious the stands are, because they feel like they have to justify their love for something. So like a modern, and this is part of the reason why the music industry is so gatekeepy. Because a modern indie music, you probably never heard of it, kind of hipster, has to be even more signaling to their own intelligence than they would have had to, before the days of Spotify, right? When literally everything is at everyone's fingertips. So they have to go, this isn't deep enough now. Like, no true hipster would listen to this shit anymore. Which, does that make it good again? I don't know. I think it's good. Like, fuck artistic elitism. I think that now is the perfect time to revisit this kind of music that you would have been turned off of. Because, A, the whole discography is just laid open to you. B, we got music club playlists and shit, and like, we'll tell you what to listen to. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I can... If anyone wanted a music club playlist of like, just like, oh, like, let's hit certain genres and stuff, that would be cool. I would love to do that. But I'm not, I don't know. I'm not about to go through all that effort if no one wants it. But yeah, Arcade Fire. Another thing about them, I think that their music, their modern stuff, the stuff that they've been putting out recently, is not even close to as good as this. Oops. Oops. But really, though, like, what was their most recent project? Let's see. Everything Now. It was really 2017. Huh. Oh, no. 2018. And then they had one song from the Dumbo soundtrack. So that is ballin'. That is really big money. I mean, they probably did make a lot of money off of that. But that's all that is. I think that if it's your magnum opus, you're not going to put it on the Dumbo soundtrack, you know what I mean? Like if it's truly your greatest masterpiece of audio art, your first release isn't going to be the Dumbo soundtrack. So I'm not going to listen to it. Sam, are you there? Can you hear me? Silence. I'm going to keep going. Oh,
Okay.
hello.
God.
I can hear you. It's frozen immediately again.
I'm back. Jesus Christ.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Seriously?
I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, we're good. It did
Okay,
freeze right as you turned the camera on, but we're good now, I think. Oh no, it's frozen again.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, what did I miss?
Mucho. I was talking about how Arcade Fire's latest release was on the Dumbo soundtrack. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, not good.
I think where I cut off, I was based.
Uh, oh,
Very lo-fi.
huh?
Oh no.
Yeah, it's not much better, is it?
You, was I coming through clear there? Well, I will try turning my camera off to see if
Yeah, I mean, that might be it.
to save that bandwidth.
I mean, you're coming through clearly now, but to be fair, a lot of times your audio would still come through, but it would just be your video that paused. But it definitely seems better right now.
Yeah. I'll just assume that something's throttling the upload speed.
Yeah.
Although I can see my connection going from green to red to green to red, so
I mean,
anyway,
we're able to hold a conversation now.
yeah.
So what were you saying?
But yeah, I think kind of the key distinction between, this stuff, like the contemporary lo-fi sound and a lot of this like early mid 2000s indie stuff is like contemporary lo-fi sounds a lot like you're listening to somebody else's memories.
Right.
Right. Whereas, and admittedly, like the mid 2000s indie stuff feels that way as well, but it's a little different, right? It feels like more of a collective, again, more of a collective dreaming as opposed to the sort of low fidelity recording of a childhood.
All right, like that scene in Dune that I can't wait for it to be in the movie, where they have a giant mind orgy.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what this album sounds like. It's not what this album sounds like, but I want to hear an album that sounds like that, and I can't. You think they're going to take that out of the movie? Do you think they're just not going to include that? Or it'll only be like 2 seconds of people going like, ooh.
I have no idea. I could see Villeneuve leaving it in.
I mean, that's like the turning point when he becomes like godlike. So like, they have to put it. I don't know. I don't know. No spoilers for the Timothée Chalamet Dune movie, I guess. But like, God, I mean, I think if I were gonna make a Dune movie, I'd make it in 2 parts. But like, I know that you can't necessarily count on the first part.
I had fun getting the funding for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the book is very clearly written in 2 parts. Like, I guess you just kind of skip over most of the first half, or the first part of the book. You just kind of speed through all that, because that's not really movie material. It's a lot of standing around and talking. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be more of a television show type thing.
Yeah. But Arcade Fire... I'm sure they like Timothée Chalamet. There's definitely a large crossover audience of people who like Timothée Chalamet and people who like Arcade Fire.
Yeah, yeah. kind of like Wes Anderson in Vampire Weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Shout out to anyone who has worked at a movie theater during a Wes Anderson release. You will see so many Vampire Weekend shirts.
Yeah. I can get that vibe. Vampire Weekend has a similar vibe to Wes Anderson in that it's like non-threatening. It's like extremely non-threatening. So
non-threatening, like hyper real.
Yeah. So like, I can get that, I guess. Lots of like, I don't know, 18, 19-year-old girls who do at least one form of art. Like, they paint.
Yeah.
Or they take, like, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. How long have we been going? Oh, God. I forgot to set it to just chatting. My soul. Not that anyone watches anyways, as horrible as that is to say about. So it's not like it matters. Not report. And the VOD will be just chatting. And it doesn't matter, because when people are just searching the just chatting tag, this is not what they're looking for. Normally.
Yeah.
I don't have... Maybe this. There we go. Y'all like some hairy titties? Um, that I just had an idea, but I'll hold that one. 'Cause um, but yeah, I don't know if you have anything. I went through. Oh,
No, I think we could probably go into ratings.
yeah. This was ranked in the top like 100 albums of the 2000s, number 2, just behind Radiohead's Kid A, I believe it was the album that they chose.
Jesus.
Yeah, Kid A was the album that they chose.
That tracks.
Yeah, and I was talking about how there's a crossover fan base of like people who like Arcade Fire probably like Radiohead, but people who like Radiohead don't necessarily like Arcade Fire if Radiohead is the least heavy thing that they listen to. You know? There's a lot of people who listen to like metal and Radiohead, and like those people would not like Arcade Fire, but someone who likes Arcade Fire would like Radiohead. Yeah. But yeah, we could do ratings. You want to go first, or do you want me to?
I can go first, I suppose. So, yeah, listenability, pretty goddamn high. Pretty goddamn high. I think it is the sort of thing that, like, for choosing for active listening, I would get fatigued of more quickly as opposed to passive listening, because, but in general, I'd put it at like an 8.5, which feels weird to say because this is like not really my vibe music wise. In general, like. I tend to be a little more emotionally monochrome. Maybe that's not the right word. It's just I can feel the kind of like golden hour haze over a lot of this music, and that I think I like things a little more overtly bleak.
Right, a little later at night. It's sunset at the earliest.
Yeah. Because, I'll say I don't really describing my taste as emotionally monochrome, I think, is needlessly self-effacing. I do like emotional dissonance in my music, but yeah, there's just a little too much coziness and nostalgia for me. To relate to intensely on a personal level. I'm not saying it makes me like it any less. It's just like the sort of as like. Just it is outside of my typical taste is all. So again, the high listenability is kind of a commendation of the success of their effort. Good music delivering a perspective on the past and life in general that would normally be somewhat alien to me. Cohesion, yeah, the album. All of the songs feel like they're supposed to be there. It does, jury's out on whether or not the arc, there was like an intentional arc of a story in place, or if there was an overall emotional arc they were trying to follow. But I think in general, all of the everything fits well together. Things don't really overstay their welcome, even when there are a lot of consistent recurring ideas. So for cohesion, I would put it at like an 8 as well. Again, not the sort of thing where it's I can feel the way everything is constructed to fit together, but it all sits nicely. It's kind of like a well-made wood floor, right? It just looks nice. Everything is well dressed and fits well together.
Yeah.
Weird factor. That's hard to do. I almost want to go with the like typical abstention vote of like 5, because their instrumentation, I think, particularly at this point in time, um, again, bringing in timpanis, bringing in, hey, I'll bump it up to like a 6, because they do, in general, I think it's not going for weird. It's going for like this kind of enveloping, like closed, warm space sound
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time, which is in some ways kind of antithetical to weird. But at the same time, they're using again these like really atonal string builds in places, bringing in the timpani, um, and in general, kind of departing from the established instrumentation for rock music. So I'll give them like a 6 or a 7 on weird factor. I will let people decide whichever they think I should be giving. That's what I, of the two. Just pretend I gave whichever sounds better to you. Um, um, okay, that's cohesion, listenability, weird factor, and then musicianship. That's hard because there's not anything here that's like showy, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing here that's incredibly difficult to execute. We often talk about the fact that that's not necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for something to be, for somebody to have good musicianship, right? You know, you think about B.B. King, who could say more with one note than, you know, some people do with an entire solo. But in general, though, I think the whole album, like, it feels greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Which again is a testament to, is in its own way a testament to the quality of the musicianship, is the fact that they can all co-write and work together in a way that really does make it greater than the sum of its parts. Is quite difficult. In fact, it's moving exactly the opposite direction of like metal that can get annoying, right? And that like it's the sort of thing where it's like, oh, if I were to isolate the guitar solo, it's really, really impressive, but weirdly it just feels like unnecessary and way too showy, right? Whereas here, again, there's it all comes together really, really well. Even though if you were to isolate any particular track, there's nothing to like.
Yeah, it'd be boring. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Except for again, like the string bits frequently do like interesting, weird things. Which is all to say, yeah, it's hard to give a rating on musicianship here. Again, so for like overall like compositional effectiveness, I'll give it probably an 8 or a 9. As for the like technical, you know, the technique facet, it's not super high, like a 6. Like they're solid, but this is more a testament to their ability to cooperate and collectively imagine than to really rock the shit out of their instrument, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, and I should comment on the vocals. I will keep it at like a, as much as the like unpolished vocal style can be talked about as being, you know, poor technique. I do think it's effectively utilized here. It's emotionally impactful. So for all of the vocal performances as a group, because I know they have a couple different singers. Probably like a 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like the vocals are such a big part of the album. I couldn't imagine them being different. You know what I mean? Like if they were super polished, I almost think that would ruin it for me.
Yeah, it would definitely be worse.
Yeah.
For having the more, it would just feel less raw. I
Yeah.
realized just one tiny note. I do like that they're frequently using distortion and like adding harmonic richness to bass lines
Mm,
to make them audible.
yeah.
Might not be for the purpose of making them audible, but I love me some distorted bass. So
Yeah, absolutely. This album, harmonic richness is a good word in general for this album. It almost feels like saturated, right? Like you turn up the saturation on
yeah,
like it's just um as for my ratings, I'm probably gonna be pretty similar to you. Listenability 8, um musicianship like 6. It's good. They do a lot of good stuff, but like it could be more. It doesn't need to be
yeah.
more for
It's
the sake of the music, but like they haven't really shown me any reason to give it a higher rating than that.
yeah, it's nothing to write home about
Right.
individually, at least.
Weird factor, like 6. Like, if this album came out this year, I would give it like a 3 or a 4. But like,
Yeah,
it coming out back then in 2004 is different. Um, and album cohesion, it's not a concept album, but it is close. There are some strings missing for it to be like super cohesive and super tight. Um, there are definitely ways where you could have made it a lot more cohesive, but I think 7 is probably a good score. Um, just yeah, I mean, all you need to do is just give it a better through line, and then um, have a little bit more transitions between some songs. There are some just like song instead of, but then there also is places where
yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds like they were written together. So it's like, you know, I don't know. Um, it almost feels like part of the album was written as a concept, but then there are also songs, especially towards the end, like in the middle of the end, that are just songs that they wrote that sound very
Yeah.
similar, but don't have to do with the actual
No, totally
concept
agreed.
itself, with the like the neighborhood and whatever sort of that they hit um, earlier on, which is fine.
Totally agreed.
Yeah. Um, Overall, I'm going to give this album an 8.9. It's not a 9, but it's damn close. I think it's really, really good as a piece of music, as it being perfectly what it is, what it's trying to be. And are there better albums in the earth, in my ears, on Spotify? Absolutely, there are better albums. But for what it's trying to do, it's fantastic. What is your overall?
You know, I think I'm just gonna copy paste pretty much that entire. I think that summarizes my feelings pretty
Yeah.
closely. It's like the sort of thing where I would say, for accomplishment of artistic intent, yeah, like 8.9, maybe even a full 9. Um, just in general, not super my vibe.
Yeah.
But again, like this is for full disclosure to the audience. That's coming from the perspective of somebody who with a very hostile relationship with their own past, and so like nostalgia, sentimentality, and albums in general tended to like evoke things in me that I don't like,
Yeah.
or they just remind me of the difference between, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And this album is certainly nostalgic.
Yep.
So,
But it's good, and I did enjoy listening to it quite a bit.
all right.
Can't dock it points for not necessarily being something I would write, you know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because if everyone wrote music that sounded like exactly like your music, then your own artistic whatever wouldn't be. It wouldn't be
Yep.
unique. Yeah, I don't know. One, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. This is definitely one of those albums too that, like, depending on my mood and depending on the circumstances in which I'd listen to it, and I would have listened to it for the first time, would have dramatically changed my opinion on it. If I was forced to listen to this, I probably would hate it. Like, I would probably think it's fucking awful. But me having discovered it by myself at a specific time when it was, you know, relevant to me and my life and the feelings that I was feeling and stuff, I was like, oh, this is so good. So, like, yeah, because there are definitely some albums where, like, if I was forced to listen to it, and I would still like it. Yeah, I wouldn't say that for this.
That's a really good point, and I think that kind of precisely identifies what I'm talking about when I talk about, like, having this general weird relationship with albums that evoke nostalgia, because, like, frequently this was the kind of music that, like, more maudlin sentimental people I knew would be like, oh my god, listen to this, you know. And if you're not coming to it on your own terms, it can feel like being held prisoner by somebody else's nostalgia, right? Trapped in somebody else's past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which will, you know, quite understandably, depending, yeah, can quite understandably elicit this, like, no, get me the fuck out of here response. But
right.
Coming to it as part of the music club, you know, coming to it with an open mind, it was good. I like a lot of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Be interested to see what their contemporary stuff sounds like, to figure, like, has their sound evolved much, or is it?
Yes, and I gotta say, I don't like their new stuff. Like, I'm not into it. They definitely try to incorporate electronic elements a lot more, and
yeah, changing with the times.
Right. And the thing is like, this is their first album, I believe. I don't think it was their first thing they ever released. No, it wasn't. But it was their first full album. It's such a staple of the time, of the vibe and the sort of more natural instrumentation and stuff like that. This being the way that it is, I listen to the newer stuff, and it doesn't do it for me in the way that this does.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I know there are people who do like their modern music. If I look at their top 5 songs on Spotify, only 2 are from this album. So, and their number 1 is not. So, you know, other people have different opinions, and that's okay. And they still have a lot of monthly listeners, over 3 million.
Damn.
Yeah. So, comparatively, they have about the same amount of listeners, monthly listeners, as Thundercat did. Who is a very modern sounding artist. So, they are still present in the zeitgeist. But yeah, it's funny, actually. Something you said reminded me of something I said when you were gone, is Arcade Fire. It's like one of those, like, Arcade Fire fans back in the day sucked, and that's what stopped a lot of people from listening to this kind of music. And because it's the total stereotypical hipster oh, here's
Yeah.
something you've never heard of before. But that type of mindset
Yeah.
doesn't exist modernly, or it can't really reasonably exist modernly because of Spotify and Apple Music and stuff, and all the music being right there. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just, it
And
really
it's
is. Oh, go ahead. Huh?
what I think in general, all the attitude towards that behavior.
I know what he's trying to say, and I agree.
Is
I agree. People don't like it.
bad.
Yeah. It's like getting a syllable at a time.
The, like people generally recognize.
Oof. That's a laugh. Or a breath, just broken up. I don't know.
No.
I mean, it's been done happening.
Am I cutting out again?
Oh!
Am
Hello?
I back?
Hello, you're back? Hello? 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 Dang, big rip. I mean, we're pretty much done, but like, big rip. He said grr. I got you for a bit, though. I'm just
Oh my-
gonna... Hello?
Am I back?
Are you back?
I guess for now. Yeah,
Okay.
you corrected what I was, which was that there's generally a lot less. The hipster routine doesn't get you social capital anymore. It's
Right.
not cool.
Right. Also, it's just a stand culture thing. I mean, we didn't call it then when there was a bunch of hipsters, but that's exactly what it is, oh, the thing that I like is better than the thing that you like. Sort of fan wars type bullshit. It's annoying as fuck. But now it's all relegated to Twitter.
Yeah.
So and there aren't Arcade Fire stand. I mean, I'm sure there are, but it's not prevalent anymore. Sam, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but
I would worry. I would just worry being an Arcade Fire stand at this point in time.
I mean,
feel like you're kind of trapped in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, it depends on how old you are. If you're
how many people
17 and you discovered Arcade Fire and you're like, I fucking love this shit, go off.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you are in your mid-30s and you're still, like, watching Garden State, and, you're still kind of that vibe, you need to chill. You need to get with the times.
Which, again, consume whatever media you choose. No judge.
Garden State, though?
The
Roof.
the for cultural relic that is
Zach Braff's career. Haha. But I think I think this is a good time to wrap. Thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, follow. Do all the things. Don't comment. Tell me what you think. Oh my god.
yeah, before my internet craps out again.
Right. What should we listen to? Yeah, all those things. Get at me. And have a nice day. You better fucking have